Good morning, everybody. This is Gregory with 5 Minute Catholic Apologetics. Thank you for joining me this Saturday morning as I'm slowly pouring my hot tea to make sure I don't spill it. Sorry for being a little late here. It was not my guest's fault. It was my fault. I wanted to get my tea steeping, which it is now steeped and ready to go. So I am going to bring Jim on in a second. Just a couple of housekeeping things. As usual, like I think Jim's going to be our fourth speaker since I was able to interview people. YouTube allowed me to interview people. So Jim is the first, I believe, that is an SSPX, I guess we'll call it that. Now, he is not, of course, part of the clergy of the SSPX, but he is somebody who does go to an SSPX chapel. And so we're going to talk about his journey, like we talked about with our other two, we had Andrew and Joseph and Stephen and Amber Rose, a religious hippie. So we're just going to talk about his religious journey, what eventually brought him to the SSPX, why is he in the SSPX as opposed to one of the Ecclesia Dei communities. And then, of course, you guys can call in at any time if you have anything that you want to ask us about any topic. It doesn't have to be per se about Jim's journey. You can ask about me. You can ask about apologetics, politics going on in the church right now, whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. It's just free flow conversation. So I'm going to bring on Jim here. And as always, if you appreciate my content, there's a little join button. If you want to join and make a little donation, that's awesome. Or if you want to super chat, then we'll read something that you have to say. And remember, with super chats, as opposed to PayPal, with super chats, YouTube does get half of that. See, that's like, it's the mordida, as they say in my people in Mexico. It's the little bribe, right? So they do take half of it. Whereas if you donate, let's say through PayPal, there's a PayPal link. PayPal link, it's like 5.5%. But either way, super chat if you like. So let's bring on Jim. Let's say hi to everybody. Natalia, hello. It's the same crew. It's like the same 10 who post comments on all my episodes. There's Jim. Can you hear me, Jim?
I can. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak
Oh,
to you and your crew there. I really appreciate it, and I listened to some of the other interviews you had, and I really appreciate you talking to lay people. A lot of times, I listen to some of the internet shows, Tim Flanders and Taylor Marshall. They tend to talk to experts, and a lot of times
pundits.
yeah,
Yeah.
they tend to avoid the elephant in the room, So I
Well,
guess
look, I can tell you, I used to have YouTube. I'll tell you that lots of reasons they bring on other people is because those other people have a subscriber base, and ultimately behind it all. And I tend to have a kind of a cynical view of this, but a lot of the Catholic, and I mentioned it when I was talking to Stephen. If they bring on somebody who has their own subscriber base, then they're going to cross pollinate. They'll get more subscribers, they'll get more views,
sure.
and they get more money. So,
And these
but
guys, people you had on, I mean, I could see, me smoking a cigar and enjoying their conversation. I mean, I'm sure we would be friends. I mean, they really, these all good people. So
yeah. So let's just get to it. What state do you live in? Where do you live?
yeah, I'm a Jersey guy. So
Jersey,
yeah,
the
born and
land of Bon Jovi and
that's right. Bruce
Springsteen, right?
Springsteen, Cool in the Gang, all those.
Oh, really cool. And the gangs from New Jersey.
Oh
There you
yeah,
go.
oh yeah. A lot of musicians, Frankie Valli, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a really rich area. I grew up right outside Manhattan, North Jersey, a city called Clifton. Um,
Okay.
yeah, very Catholic area, Catholic ethnics. We had,
A
I
lot
mean,
of
I'm
Italians.
Italian, Polish, Spanish. Mostly like when I was growing up, Puerto Ricans and Cubans. Um, I don't want to leave anybody out. Portuguese, Spaniards. Um, we had them all in my city that I grew up. It was a pretty diverse city. Like some of the cities next to us were kind of smaller. They might have been like 90% Italian, whatever. But
Yeah.
we had, a mix where I grew up. So um, I have a lot of, I always tell my kids I saw like the tail end of the old America. I was born in 64, so I saw the destruction of the church, like up close and personal, like the destruction of the Catholic neighborhoods,
Yeah.
the morality, you know.
Well,
And
let's get to that. So, do you
sure.
have any memories of the old Latin Mass? I mean, you must have been like 6 or 7 when they
No,
were
I
all
don't,
that was away.
yeah. I mean, because um, in these ethnic areas, the changes were slow. It wasn't like, I hear people like from the Midwest, like they talk about what happened, like right away they tore out a lot of the altar rails. Like we still receive like kneeling on the tongue.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, we still had confession, during the week and on the weekends. A lot of people went to confession. I mean, the churches were overflowing. This is like in the early 70s, and you got to understand these neighborhoods is very homogeneous. I mean, so
Mhm.
all your neighbors are going to the same mass, the same parish. So,
Right. That's
um,
when we had ghettos. I mean, that's
yeah,
when we had our Catholic ghettos that were pretty much done by
yeah,
ethnic
the
lines. You
morality was very, of course, we're going back about 50 years, but the morality was a stark difference to today. I mean, someone getting divorced was shocking, today
you
we
saw relatively big families.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it started like the rot started. Like I said, I got into the tail end of it. I think in the 50s, you did have families, the bigger families, but then you had the typical two children. Um, so obviously, it was a mile wide and an inch deep because as the changes came through, the people gave up the faith, and it was like overnight. I mean, it was within I mean, looking back on it, of course, I was living in the middle of it. I was young. I didn't understand a lot of the things that were going on. But looking back, people got comfortable. I think they got into the materialist world,
What
they
about
started,
your parents? How would you describe your parents' religious upbringing? How did they raise you? And what
yeah,
was their view of all the changes?
they didn't really talk about it. I mean, it wasn't my father, God bless him, you know, my parents were good, really good people, I mean, I had a great upbringing. Um, my mother was from New Orleans, so she was more religious than my father. My father was like a cultural Catholic. I mean, he would go to mass, um, but he like went to school. He had the opportunity to go to college. He used to go to college at night, and at that time, he came out thinking like, only ignorant people believe this stuff. He was kind of a contradiction because if he would say this to us, but if he met a stranger and someone started attacking the church, he'd get very angry. You know what I mean? So, um, but he would make comments like, at that time, we're going into like the 70s, early 70s. This was the thinking coming out of the 60s and 70s that religion really, we don't need religion anymore. Um, humanity has all the answers. Like I said, this is just I'm looking back on it. I can't
Well,
speak for
I
anyone.
mean, this is the postmodernist lie is that our
Yeah,
Saint Pius the
I mean,
10th
now it's,
even
now
about
we see the effects of all this, but at the time, the people really, they came out of World War II. There was a lot of disillusionment with Vietnam. Um, people were asking questions. Before that, people just accepted the change. Like I asked my mother later on, as I found tradition, like, Mom, like why, because we hardly ever said the rosary. I said, why did we say the rosary? Why didn't we, how could you go along with this stuff? And she said, well, this is what we were told. Like people just accepted the the hierarchy. They respected the hierarchy. I mean, for us now, I mean, I remember my mother crying when Richard Nixon resigned. She was
well,
actually
I think this was a different world because we
yeah,
respected authority in general. Like you
right.
said with
People
Watergate.
respected the president. Like when Jimmy Carter was president, they might have disagreed with him, but they respected him. Like they, looked up to the presidency. They looked up to, um, people in authority. So that's all been torn down now. But at the time, so the parish that we went to, I mean, it was a huge parish. I mean, I probably could fit 2,000 people in it, right?
Mhm.
It was filled. I mean, if you weren't there 20 minutes early, you were standing along the wall during mass. The people, we used to stand on the corner and nuns would be walking up and down, the streets. The priests would
Young
come.
nuns. Young
Yeah,
nuns too. I remember going to Poland 15 years ago, and that was one of the stark things. I was like, oh my God, there's nuns that are attractive in their 20s. I'm like, what is this?
yeah, like we used to go to the pizza joints and the priest would come in,
Yeah,
and I remember like everybody would get quiet. He'd walk from table to table and say hello to everybody. It was a different world. That world is gone now, but now
for
all those
sure.
nuns, I don't know what happened to them. I went to public school, and even in the public schools, like, before football games, a priest would come and bless us, before the game. Like we would say prayers. I
Well,
remember,
I don't know about New Jersey, but Madeline Murray O'Hare was the big atheist that was successful in getting religion taken out of public schools, and that was like in the early 60s. So
yeah.
prior to that, people would actually say prayers in school. And the funny thing about her is that she ended up being murdered by, I think, her son. Her son ended up.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, that's a strange thing. But so
That's the world I live in.
when you got to your high school years or your college years, was there a period of time where you just stopped going to church, or did you go to church even in college years?
Yeah, I mean, as I got to high school, I pretty much fell away. I mean, we would go. My mother would take us. She would make us go to catechism. I went to public school. I mean, I always had respect for God, but the church became irrelevant to me. It didn't really speak to me at that age. I didn't go to college. I enlisted in the Marine Corps. So when I
Okay.
went to the Marines, I was stationed out in California, Camp Pendleton, and that's really where I encountered Protestants. Like, I didn't really know a Protestant before that.
That goes back to the Catholic ghetto, right? You're just
Yeah,
surrounded
I
by
thought you
life.
were either Catholic or Jewish. I didn't really. I mean, I would see these Protestant things on TV, with the preachers and all, but I never really understood it. You know what I mean? So that's really what I encountered when these people would ask me tough questions. I wasn't really educated in the faith, so they would attack the faith, and I didn't know how to answer them either. So, I mean, they were pretty aggressive at that time. This is early '80s, um, and actually, when I got out of the military, I met my wife. We got married in the church. My wife was from South America, um, from Peru. Her uncle's a priest, actually. And we got married in the church, but then we actually became Protestant. I became a Protestant later
Really?
on.
Which denomination?
I was like an Anabaptist, like it's called a Church of Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have to get rebaptized? So they didn't
No,
accept your Catholic baptism
I
as
think no, actually I
baby?
did. Yeah, I did get rebaptized. Yeah, which is sacrilegious.
Well, once you're baptized, you can't get baptized over and over. It's one, and it's stuck with you
Right.
forever. That's the Catholic view, but not certainly not the Baptists or any of those who reject infant
Right.
baptism.
But I got to
So
give them credit because at the time I was living in Pennsylvania, with Central PA, and I got to give them credit because they taught me basic Christianity. Like I never understood, even though I went to catechism, like I never like who Jesus actually was. You
mhm.
know, Jesus was the Son of God. Well, I thought God had a son. I didn't really understand the theology that Jesus was God. I never understood that. Like Jesus
So
was, I never understood
you
what Eucharist was, even though I made my communion, I did first confession. I was confirmed. I didn't understand these basic.
why is that? Because back then you were probably still using Baltimore Catechism, and I think a lot of the
No,
traditionalists look back pre-Vatican II and think that the Catechism was much better because we all complain how the catechesis is woeful, and you have so many dumbed down Catholics and certainly Catholic children. So we look back at the 50s and early 60s and think, well, the Baltimore Catechism, all Catholics knew the faith really well. But you're saying that's not true.
no, we did. I was, like I said, the changes were coming through. So they were going to the new stuff. Of course, I didn't know that at the time because I didn't know
Yeah.
what the old stuff was. And Yeah, I mean, look, maybe they taught it, maybe I just didn't absorb it. Of course, I was a kid. Like I said, all your neighborhood friends were in the class with you. It wasn't like, oh, I'm a Catholic and all the people around here are Jehovah Witnesses. You know what I mean? Like you were all in there together. So we were, clowning around, and the nuns used to actually, because we were public school, they were like, you public school kids, they would actually hit us with the rulers and stuff still.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the liberal Catholics or Catholics that left the faith, sometimes they'll say that's why they left the faith is they have this traumatic experience with
Right.
nuns and priests hitting them or paddling them. That's some of their excuses.
Well,
I remember
we
I went to a
deserved it.
Catholic elementary school and I was paddled all the time.
We deserved
didn't
it,
care.
because we were like, but yeah, I mean, I had a lot of friends that went to the Catholic school, and the city I grew up in, I mean, there was a ton of Catholic schools. I mean, there
Yeah,
was probably 10 elementary schools. They're all closed now. I mean,
sure.
yeah,
It's
but yeah. Um,
so
so
let's
yeah,
get to you were Anabaptist, or you were in that Protestant branch. What brought you and your wife back to Holy Mother Church?
okay. So yeah, so I was in this Protestant church, and get into the Bible and all this stuff. And then one day they had like a meeting with like international meeting, and they started talking about like having women pastors and stuff. So I approached the pastor of the church. I said, look, I mean, this is against the Bible. I mean, Paul, I forgot,
I think it's Second Timothy says that you can't have female leaders.
Yeah, he quotes, I mean, it's written that, come on, like women aren't supposed to have leadership roles in the church. And he said, well, Jim, that was then, the culture now we recognize, differently. That was the world they lived in. And I understood, like, I'm in my 20s still. I understood that, well, gee, I mean, that will deconstruct everything if you use that logic. You could say, well, marriage, you could, homosexuality, you could go down the line. So then I started asking questions. The first time I really asked a question in my life, where did the Bible actually come from? Now, my neighbor at the time was Portuguese, and she used to debate me. She was a diehard Catholic, and she used to debate me. And, I talked to her about it, and she said, well, gee, Jim, she gave me a book, The Doctors of the Church.
Okay.
And I dug into that. And I'll make a long story short, I found out that the early church was actually Catholic. And so I went back to the church. My family was relieved, my uncles and all that. So I went back to church, but now I went in with my eyes wide open. Like,
so
now,
at this point, had anyone else in your family left the faith? Because during the 70s and 80s, there was a mass exodus to different denominations, or just to atheism, or just I'm spiritual but not believing in an established church. Did anyone else leave from your family?
Yeah, my sister, I mean, I had 4 in my family. So my sister pretty much left the faith. My older brother, I mean, we were all my older brother was kind of like lukewarm. My younger brother was lukewarm. My father really didn't go. My mother would go. She was kind of lukewarm, So when I left, when I was going to the Protestant church, they would say, why are you doing this? And I would ask them the questions. Well, why do Catholics, pray to the saints? Why?
I'm sure you were really self-righteous about it too. Like a lot of Catholics who become Protestants, like you were just like, well, why are you still Catholic? You worship the Pope, you worship Mary, you worship the saints.
Right. Although I got to say, I respected the Pope and everything. But yeah, I mean, I brought up all the typical stuff, and they couldn't answer me. They would just say, "Oh, you're stupid. You got to understand Italians. You're an idiot. That's all they could say." So it was just like a ad hominem attacks. So they couldn't answer the actual question. So that's why I kind of fell into it. Like I said, looking back, it was a blessing because it taught me basic Christianity. I came back with my eyes wide open. Now I moved back to Jersey from Pennsylvania, and I started going to a parish. And this was during the time, JP2 was the Pope.
What year are we talking about where you reverted?
This was like 96, 95, 96,
Okay. And did you go back? Did you say you didn't go back to your childhood parish? You went to a different parish?
I went to a different parish, in New Jersey. And it was pretty conservative. I mean, I didn't know an Novus Ordo tradition at the time, but the priests they had some priests that were pretty good. They had some priests that were pretty liberal.
Yeah.
And I started seeing in the Catholic Church what I saw in the Protestant Church,
they
wanted, at the time, altar girls. That was a big controversy when the Pope wanted, when they wanted to introduce altar girls. So I kind of said, oh man, like what's going on here? Like I read about the church, because I really got into the history. When I came back, I was like, where is this church at? Like, I go to mass and it was just, I mean, some of the priests were good, but it was just blah. There was just no zeal. There was no spirituality to it, really.
Did you
Uh,
look around in the congregation, just see people barely singing, mumbling to the words, not really paying attention? I mean,
yeah,
that's
there
what
was
I
no
would see.
singing. You would
There's
just
no
have,
singing.
yeah, you would just have like, they have like a choir, and the actual people never really sang.
Yeah. And the
Uh,
choir was all about me, watch me sing, how great, when really their job is to get people to sing and use a key that men can sing in. But most of the time, of course, the choir is run by women and they just want to make it like an opera. And then they pick very effeminate songs that men aren't going to respond to at all. And that's one of the many reasons why a lot of men were leaving the church.
oh yeah, it was very feminine, even
Sure.
though the church I went to was considered pretty conservative, and one of the priests was really conservative, really, I hate that term, what I mean, but he was trying his best. So um, actually, I was going to start looking at orthodoxy
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
because I
yeah.
was like
Why was that?
well, with the whole, altar girls and all the other things JP2 was doing, the community, and all these abuses that were going on. I said, well, the church, obviously the Catholic Church, it
Has
can't be.
lost its way.
Yeah, it's lost its way. So, um, but then like the one priest I was talking to you about, I had a good serious conversation with him, and he said, "Well, Jim, why don't you come with me to the Latin Mass? I say the Latin Mass at this parish on Sunday." And I said, "What do you mean the Latin Mass? I mean, what is it? Just a Mass in Latin?" And he goes, "No, there used to be a whole nother Mass. You don't know that?" I said, "No,
Yeah.
I heard that before." So he said, "Well, meet me at this time. You could come with me." So I did, and that was it. When I walked in, I had no idea what was going on. I had no clue.
And this was the
But
late '90s too, or was this
yeah, this was like 90, I say 97, 98,
okay?
something like that.
It
And
was an SSPX chapel, or was it?
no, it was a fraternity chapel. Of course, I didn't know. I had no idea who the fraternity, the Pius X. I just said, "Wow, like this," and like a light switch went on. Like, wow, this is the Catholic Church. Like, this is what I read about. And
So
so I,
I'm curious if you remember the first time you went to the Latin Mass. I mean, it's such a stark contrast to the
it is.
constant participation they have to do at the typical Novus Ordo, all the excessive singing. We need 3 communion hymns, you know. So what was it that you found so attractive? Was it just, I'm sure the solemnity was one of it, but I mean, like, what was the big draw, and what was like? Just kind of explain that your first time, if you remember.
Just the spirituality, like, it was just spiritual, it was quiet.
Mhm.
You prayed, it wasn't just throwing words back and forth. You know what I mean? Yeah, it, it was Catholic. I don't know. It was,
Were you freaked out? Like, why is the priest's back facing us? Why is he not looking? I'm offended. Why is he looking at
I
us?
mean, we had a monastery that was close to us. And so like I would wander in there once in a while. They must have been doing the Latin Mass. So I'm not going to say this, I kind of wandered in, like looking back, I probably walked into Latin Masses and didn't know it. Because once in a while I would go to this church and, I thought they were speaking in Italian and stuff.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's close, right?
yeah.
The Italian comes from it.
So
So, how long were you at this church?
the fraternity,
Yeah.
I was there a couple years. I was living like in North Jersey, but then my father and I had my kids. They had like a small school there, so I
Okay.
had my 2 older children were in that school. It's a very small school, but we were struggling, financially. And my father had a little house him and my mother bought down in the southern part of the state by the shore. We call the Jersey Shore. And he said, "Look, I want to get rid of this house. Do you want it?" He asked my older brother. He didn't want it. So I said, something. Me and my wife talked about it. We decided to move to the southern part of the state. So this is like an hour and a half away.
Mhm.
So then we moved there. and then I had to find a church. I had to drive an hour, like towards Philadelphia. There's like a diocesan church that just does the Latin Mass.
Okay.
We went there, and that
So
was
you
pretty much.
you would
That
drive
was
all the way to
the
Philly to
photo one.
find a Latin mass in Philly?
It wasn't in Philly; it was in Jersey, but over by that part of the state that kind of borders Philly.
Camden?
Yeah, Cherry Hill area, Camden
Okay.
area. It's
So
called
you were driving pretty far to find a Latin mass. Was that the SSPX church that you went to eventually or not?
No, no, that was like I said, it was a diocesan church
Okay.
that they only did the Latin Mass. It was actually, you know who John Vanieri is?
No.
Oh, okay. He used to run Catholic Family News. It was an old monastery that this group held on to. John Vanieri was one of them, and
Mhm.
they kept the mass and all. And then another group bought it, and the diocese accepted it, and they just to this day they still have a Latin mass there run by. They have a beautiful mass, beautiful choir.
Are they one of those parishes that will have English masses, but then they'll have like one or two Latin masses on Sunday, or
No,
all the masses
it's
Latin?
all in Latin. It's in like their when they sold it, they said, "Look, this is the deal. It has to be Latin. Like you can never
Okay.
do a Novus Ordo here. You can never, you know what I mean?" So yeah, so we went there, and I used to work as a lineman for the phone company. It was called Bell Atlantic at the time, and then they laid off. Verizon board ended up laying off like 800 guys. I was one of them. So now I'm without a job. And I said to my wife, we said, well, why don't we look to go to a different part of the country? So we ended up out in Idaho. So that's where I ran into Pius X, because we were trying to find a school for our kids.
Okay.
Like, let's live somewhere we could go to have a parish life. So I don't know if you're familiar with Post Falls, Idaho, and
No, I do know that Coeur d'Alene is known to have a kind of a traditional community, but I know there's a
right,
lot of
that's Coeur
Mormons that kind of
d'Alene.
live
Yeah,
in the
Coeur d'Alene,
southern.
Post Falls is right next to each other, North Idaho. Yeah, but the
Okay,
Pius X Church is in Post Falls. Yeah,
I see. So you
yeah.
were in the Panhandle near Coeur d'Alene.
Right, I was right in the Panhandle, coming from Jersey. So that was an experience. We lived there for 8 years, and that was a hard experience. But
Really quickly, like I've heard the northern Idaho winters are not as bad, like in Coeur d'Alene,
no,
because of I guess the mountains. But compare them to a Jersey winter, like which is worse? How are they different? Just really fast. I'm just curious.
Jersey winters are a lot colder. It's a lot more damper. It's a dry cold over there. And
Okay.
what the big difference is, like over here, we have infrastructure, we plow. Over there, you're on your own. Like when it snows and you live in a subdeveloped, no, you have to figure out how you're going to get out of your driveway. You know what I mean?
Okay,
So
so you went to your first SSPX church when you were in that area.
yeah, and I had my kids
Okay.
into schools. They had like a Dominican nuns that were attached to the Pius X. They ran a girls' school. So I had my daughters in there. My son was in the Pius X school at the church in Post Falls, and it was tough. I mean, I'm not gonna, you know, here I am. My wife's from South America. I'm an ethnic guy from Jersey, and so a lot of it was like a cultural shock, just being, from the East Coast. And a lot of people, they wouldn't associate with us because they said we're from the city. They didn't want their kids talking to
Well,
my children because we're from the city. You know,
I had a similar experience. I used to live in Alaska, and I came from Texas to Alaska, and I lived in Fairbanks, which is the second largest city, but it's only 40,000 people.
right?
And it was the same thing, like, who are you, you outsider? We don't trust you. Da, 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 da. So when you went to the SSPX church,
Yeah,
clearly it was Latin, but did
right.
you know the history behind SSPX?
Oh
And if
yeah, I do. Oh
what
yeah.
you already knew when you went to the church, or did you like, hey, this is a Latin mass? Oh, what's SSPX? Oh, who's
Uh,
Archbishop Lefebvre? No.
no, I used to get like newspapers, like the Remnant. Are you familiar with the
Huh.
Remnant? I used to get the Remnant, and so I knew all about Pius X. I used to do a lot of different. Um, I used to look into everything when I was over in Jersey, to go into the church in Berlin. Um, of course, I mean, Pius X was very famous because Archbishop Lefebvre. I mean, everybody knew about Archbishop Lefebvre.
Sure.
Of course, there was some people that said, "Oh, he was disobedient," blah blah blah. But most people
Well,
knew.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that. I mean, Natalia is asking about this, but we'll get to it near the end. So let's get to Idaho back to Jersey because you live in
Oh,
Jersey
to
now,
move
right?
from yeah. So yeah, I was out there, and it was just like kind of like a fish out of water. You know, and we decided, hey, let's go back to Jersey. My kids, they were in the schools for a little bit, but then we took them out of the schools. That's a whole story in itself. Um, I actually I didn't go to just the Pius X out there. I went to the fraternity chapel out there. Like Father Rippinger was my priest for a while. I
Really,
went,
from Sensus Fidelium.
yeah, yeah. He was a priest. He was with the fraternity, and he was stationed out in Coeur d'Alene. So I
I
went.
knew he was part of SSPX. I didn't know that he was your pastor. Yeah.
He was with the fraternity, not Pius X. He was
Oh,
with the fraternity. Yeah. So yeah, there was a church. There's a fraternity church out there too, and there's a Pius X church, and there's
so,
CMRI, which is Set of a Contest. I went there
right,
for
right.
a little
So
bit.
there was he was part of FSSP. When you say
Right.
fraternity of St. Peter, okay,
Yes, yes, yeah. So he was
okay.
my pastor, yeah, for a little while. And I gotta say, all the priests, whether they were from the Pius X or the fraternity or the CMRI, I was very lucky. We had great priests. They were all, I
And they
can't,
were all in Coeur d'Alene area.
yeah, Coeur d'Alene,
Isn't that
Spokane,
crazy? What is
Washington.
it about Coeur d'Alene that has those three things there? That's interesting.
I know, I
Huh.
know. And I always said, like, geez, I mean, like in Jersey, we have so many like old churches you could buy where people could actually get a job. The problem out there is people move out there and they can't find work. I mean, so many people would be like barely hanging on, A lot of people
Mhm.
make a lot of sacrifices, to be out there. Um, but it's not a paradise. It's not, that's what I found out. There's all kinds of people. Just because someone's traditional doesn't mean they're a good person, right? I mean,
No doubt.
we're
I was interviewing the religious hippie Amber Rose, and
I
she
know.
said some comments that
Yeah.
I want to date a traditional Catholic woman or man because they're strange. I'm going to date Protestants. I'm like,
I know. I listened to that interview.
but well, we can get to that point. So you eventually went to Jersey. You
Came back.
found an SSPX church there, and you've been there for the
Well,
last
no,
15
not at
years.
first. At first, I came back to where we lived before in the Jersey Shore, Manahawkin area, and I went back to the parish, that we went to. The reason why I went back to Pius X is from COVID. So when
Okay.
COVID happened, yeah, like I would
They
go to,
stayed open, but the Novus Ordo churches stayed closed for a long time. Was that
yeah.
it?
And even if like my parents retired in Virginia Beach, and my mother was dying, and there's a chapel, and it's not in Virginia Beach, it's in Chesapeake. But I went to go to mass, and they said, well, we're not allowing any more people in the church. And I said, look, my mother's dying. I mean, and they wouldn't let me in the church because they said, oh, I'm sorry, we have too many people. But the Pius X wasn't doing that, so I went back to. Um, right now, I do attend the Pius X chapel in North Jersey
And how long have you been at this chapel?
for about a year. Yeah.
So prior to that, though, you were at a Novus Ordo parish?
No, no, I was going to, it's still traditional. I would never go to a Norvis Soto parish. I would rather not go
You
to.
were going to a society? Where were you going
I was
before
going to the diocesan
Latin?
church that just does the Latin mass. Yeah, yeah, and I
Okay.
would go to like, there's also Institute of Christ the King that's about an
Okay.
hour away. I would go there. Actually, when my youngest daughter had to make her confirmation, um, and I would call, I called the church I was going to, and they said, well, gee, you have to enroll in these classes. And I was like, look, Father, I'm over an hour away. There's no way, like, my kids, she could get can I just teach her at home and you could, um, you know, just ask her questions? No, it has to be this way. So then I called the fraternity that was up north. Um, and they actually got in a pretty big argument with the priest because he's like, well, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I said, look, I mean, Father, these people in the Nova Sordo, they make confirmation. Oh, these kids don't even know up from down. I mean, and
Right.
you're putting all these burdens on us. Like I could teach my daughter at home. And he's like, well, gee, you live in a different diocese than the diocese here. I just kind of got a little, we kind of had some words back and forth because I was like, come on, we're trying to make the sacraments. Like, why is all the burden on me? Like, why is all the burden on the lay people? Like, I didn't decide to destroy the church. I didn't decide to, destroy the mass. And yet you're putting all these burdens on us that we have to jump through all these hoops instead of trying to work with us. But the priest at the Institute of Christ the King, he was very charitable, and he said, yeah, no problem. And he, I had my child confirmed there. I would have went to Pius X, but at the time I didn't realize there was a chapel that was open in that area. So
Okay, well so you've been at SSPX for a year, and that's where
yeah,
we're at now. So let's get to some of the questions that some of the people have here. But really quickly, so where I live, the archdiocese, and I'm in a city that's pretty large, like 1 million people.
sure,
They were closed for most of COVID. The Catholic churches were closed, and I belong to the Ordinariate of the Chair of St. Peter, which is kind of like Anglican,
right,
it's Latin trappings, but it's former
cool.
Anglicans. And, they were like the traditionalists when COVID happened in March 2020. I think by May of 2020, they were reopened and the pews were full, and like 90% of the people were not even masked. And this is May of 2020. And I think it kind of gives kind of like a reflection and illustrates the traditional Catholic mindset. Whereas if you juxtapose that with a lot of the Novus Ordo parishes, they stayed closed for a year, if not longer. When they
Yeah,
reopened, it was all the social distancing. I remember going to one in 2022 for a daily mass. They were still requiring everyone to mask, had no holy water, social distancing. I mean, it was just, and then you compare it to the traditional congregations, and they're like, we don't care. You mask, you don't mask, we don't care. Pews are full.
right. I mean,
Or different world.
to me, the traditional Catholics, I mean, I hate to say this, and I don't, I'm talking generally, they're the only serious Catholics left. You know what I mean? But I know there's people in the Novus Ordo, obviously, that believe, and I'm not, look, I was in the Novus Ordo growing up, but that really showed me that, hey, when the persecution really comes down, I have nothing against the fraternity, the Institute of Christ the King. Like I said, I went there. I respected their priests, these different groups, but they showed their true colors when the real crisis really does hit. They're going to fold like cheap tents because they folded pretty mediocre persecution and they just gave in like right away. So
Well, it's like we never closed the churches during the Spanish flu or the bubonic plague or anything like that, but we closed.
Walmart didn't close. Like I told the guy when in Virginia when I was trying to get into the church on a Sunday, I said I went to Walmart. I could go to Walmart right now. I could go to Home Depot right now
Because that's essential, right? Your faith is not essential.
right. So to me,
But that's a secular decision, though. That was a secular decision because we know secular authorities are pretty anti-Christian. So, I mean, right. Can we get mad necessarily at the Catholic archdiocese and dioceses for closing the church when this state was telling them to? No, well, Roman says you can disobey a government when it's unjust. So, yeah, we would like to have seen them stay open. But one of the questions is,
I mean, you got to stand. If you don't stand up, if you don't say anything, But, and we could get into the bigger stuff, but, to me, that's the overall is that the church, the Catholic Church, the Catholic hierarchy today is basically just an NGO of mobile home.
Social justice.
Yeah, it's not a serious institution anymore. It doesn't take itself seriously. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about faith. I'm talking about the hierarchy, that are running the church today. They're not serious people,
Let's answer the questions that some people have. So you've been SSPX for a year. So why are you choosing to be in the SSPX and not go to your Institute Christ the King? Like if they were all equidistant from your house and you had an Institute Christ the King FSSP and a CMRI and a SSPX, why would you choose the SSPX?
Well, we already covered it. The reason why is because when the chips were down, who stayed true, who stood by us, who gave me the sacraments,
Mhm.
who, I was turned away. I went to go to mass and I was turned away, to pray for my mother who was dying at the time. Right. I mean, that hurt. I mean, you know,
And you think that the FSSP closed, or the Institute of Christ the King closed, because they were still attached to Rome? They're still attached to the
bottom line is
diocese.
they are going when push comes to shove. Look, like I said, I have nothing against the people that go there. I'm not going to tell you where to go or what not to do. Look at actions. Actions speak louder than words, right? Listen to your mother, right? When you were growing up, when push comes to shove, these organizations will go along with whatever changes come down from Rome or the secular government. They will put a pagan idol in their chapel if they are told to do so. They
Well,
will do.
I don't. Okay, well, I think that might be a little hyperbolic if you were talking
It.
about the FSSP. I don't think the FSSP would be cool with putting like a
I don't
puppet.
think some of the priests would. I think a lot of the priests would leave at that point, but as an
Right.
organization, I'm talking about,
Well, so
they
this is one
showed
of the
they
issues
did
with
it.
the
I mean,
Ecclesia
they gave
Dei.
in. They gave in. I mean,
Well,
they
that's
said,
one of the,
the sacraments are not important. The mass is not important. Watch it on TV. I mean, they did
okay,
it.
but let's separate the two. Let's separate the Novus Ordo, typical Our Lady of Suburbia parishes, from, let's say, the
I
FSSP.
am. I'm talking about the Fraternity of St. Peter right now. I'm not talking about.
Okay, but so the Ecclesia Dei churches like the FSSP, I think their issue with that, I think that what the SSPX would say, or the CMRI, is that they're still attached to Rome. So when you saw these restrictions coming in from Francis about the Latin Mass, they actually had to adhere to it, whereas the SSPX didn't have to adhere to any of these because of their irregular status that they had. And I
Of
think
course, because
that,
I mean that's the bottom line, right? Like they're under these modernist bishops. So I mean, I get it. They're giving you your Latin mass, they're giving you, your ceremony that you prefer over. And I hate that. I hate when people say, well, I prefer the Latin mass over the Novus Ordo, because we're talking about the faith here. We're not, whether the Novus Ordo would be fine if the faith behind it, if the doctrine behind it was solid. The problem with the Novus Ordo, or let's get it. Okay, the problem with the Novus Ordo is that the doctrine behind it is not Catholic. The Novus Ordo is not a Catholic liturgy. I mean, it's a made-up liturgy that they concocted in the '60s that they had no authority to do. That they forced onto the people, and so the fraternity, and it came down from these bishops, right, all over the world. So the fraternity, yeah, they're being obedient to these bishops, not to let people into their church. I mean, you gotta draw the line somewhere. You gotta say, look, bishop, okay, you're the bishop, and you do have authority. I expect your office, but I'm not doing this. I mean, my people are coming into the church. I'm a priest. I'm giving my people the sacraments, and if you want to get rid of me over that, that's your choice. But I got to answer to God for this, and I'm not doing this. My church is staying open.
so from what I can gather from what you're saying is like one of the reasons that you got, no, I wouldn't say angry or whatever at the Ecclesia Dei churches, because they closed, and understandably so. We saw a lot of these stories of churches that were not willing to even give last rites, baptisms, and minister sacraments, and that is horrible leadership. I mean, I have an episode. The number one group I hate is poor leadership. So I totally agree with that. But if we were to take away those, where they did close. Let's say COVID never happened. Let's just say that.
Sure.
And you had an FSSP in an SSPX chapel, you would still go to SSPX. Because take away the emotional, because clearly
no. I mean, if COVID never
emotional.
happened and these things never happen, then and I had like a fraternity chapel open up, close to me, I'd go to the fraternity chapel. Definitely, I would have went to the fraternity chapel. I was going to an Ecclesia Dei chapel.
So then you would have continued to have gone to FSSP.
Oh yeah, I would have continued to have gone. It's only until when the hammer came down and I saw that, hey, I mean, these people, I mean, when the push comes to shove, they are going to give in. And this was a pretty mild persecution. I mean, come on, like nobody was being killed, nobody was being arrested, right? So what's going to happen when that starts? Because that's coming. I mean,
I agree. There's going to be a hard
5 years,
persecution.
it might come 50 years, but that's coming pretty quickly. I mean,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think I could see a large majority of Catholics in camps. I mean, I have a very early episode on my favorite Latin prayers, and I already know which prayer I'm going to say before I'm martyred. Like Miguel Pearl and the Cristeros.
Yeah. But
I can see it totally happening.
Yeah, and it's going to be the Novus Ordo people that are putting you in there. I mean, I'm telling you that right now.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be the cultural Marxists and the secularists that are going to put us in there. Who do I think is going to apostatize quicker? I think it's going to be the Novus Ordo adherents. Because even Benedict said it about 15 years ago. He said the church is going to get smaller. The church is going to get cold, and it's not going to be as big as it used to be. So who it makes sense? Who's more likely to apostatize? Probably liberal Catholics who contracept, endorse homosexual marriage and all these things. It's probably not going to be the traditional Catholics, whether you're a conservative Novus Ordo or your FSSP or SSPX or CMRI. I mean, this group is less likely to apostatize because they actually know what apostatizing actually means and how it endangers your soul. Whereas I think the left side, they're indifferentists. A lot of them are like, well, I apostatize. Right. I'll still go to heaven because we all go to heaven.
Right, exactly. And I think, they'll be throwing Protestants in jail too. I mean, it's not just going to be us, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at like Hitler threw a lot of Jews in there, but he also threw in gypsies, Catholics, and Protestants, anyone who was against the regime. But so let's go to, how do you reconcile, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, just people who don't support this.
Sure.
How do you reconcile their disobedience? How do you reconcile Lefebvre 1984 ordaining the bishops and ordaining the priests to become bishops? He was told not to do it. And how was that any different than what Luther did, what the Orthodox schismatics did, and so forth? How is that different? Because rebellion is rebellion, and Lefebvre did a rebellious act. He was told by the church. Now, we can talk about his conscience and how he prayed about it, but it's still an act of rebellion on some level to go against Rome.
It does, he did. How do I square that circle? I know, definitely, he entered dangerous territory, but, I think in hindsight, he's been vindicated. People don't know the history behind Archbishop Lefebvre. I mean, he was actually on the committee that wrote up the schema for the council. I mean, he came up with the original documents that they were supposed to be voting on and talking about. Those were all thrown into the garbage.
Bait and switch. Yeah.
So he was very, he was a very intellectual person. He reached a point where, he was negotiating with Rome, and he reached a point where he knew that they were never going to give him, he was dealing with snakes, right? John Paul II, Cardinal Ratzinger, these modernists that, they paint themselves as conservatives, but now, history shows us, especially John Paul II, I mean, the damage that they've done to the church. I mean, so, and at the time when he consecrated these bishops, this is right after the Assisi prayer meetings, if people aren't, so the apostasy was through the roof, and he knew that if he died, that was it. Tradition would have been shut down. So, yeah, I mean, just like we talked about these priests that shouldn't obey the bishops to go to this to give the sacraments, the faith was on the line. I mean, I honestly believe that Archbishop Lefebvre saved the Catholic faith from being totally obliterated. The faith was on the line, and he did it. Not only Archbishop Lefebvre, but Castro de Meyer in Brazil. Archbishop Lefebvre wasn't alone. With Castro Meyer, he was with Lefebvre when they consecrated those priests.
Well, look, I want to be clear. I think the spirit of Vatican II, you can ask different people as to what happened with Vatican II. Some would say, like, if you look at the more Bella Dodd kind of line of thinking, how the church was infiltrated by these change agents, and then they waited for their moment, and then they flipped, the Paridi, they had the Protestant advisor, and they flipped the schemas and all this, and this was all an agenda. Then you would have more the conservative EWTN types saying that the bishops were sincere, and then the spirit of Vatican II got hijacked, and then we rolled in the Novus Ordo Mass, which was catastrophic. If you've watched Mass of the Ages, have you watched the documentary on the Latin? Okay, so they haven't done part 3 yet, but at the end of part 2, they talk about Bunini kind of playing both sides, right? So, and then they eventually they cast away Bunini to Iran.
Right.
But I think part 3 is going to be more about the more recent restrictions. But here's my question to that kind of thesis is, if everybody realized that the Novus Ordo Mass was Bunini's creation, and that Bunini was likely a Mason, so when John Paul II came in, why didn't he just throw out the Novus Ordo Mass completely and go back to the Latin?
Of course, because it served their purpose. See, what drives me crazy is when you got to understand the mechanics behind all this. Or, I mean, look, a lot of it's conjecture, right? Like Taylor Marshall says, I'm just a guy with a webcam, right? I'm just giving you my opinion. But I think if you look at history and you look at the way politics, the mechanics behind the politics, like how they get what they want, false opposition, marginalizing people, they do the same tactics in the church. Vatican II didn't just come out of nowhere. It was 200 years in the making. That's what a lot of people miss. They think, oh, if I go to a Latin Mass, like somehow just the Mass itself. That's why I hate I prefer the Mass, because it's not the Mass. Of course, the Mass liturgy is important, but they were doing the Latin Mass in the 40s and 50s when the modernists were already getting in positions of control that set Vatican II in motion, right? So you got to have the faith behind the Mass, and you got to have the doctrine in place. It's not so. I lost your original question.
Well, we're talking about so more likely than not, Bunini.
Why didn't
It was Baggio. Baggio was a guy, the head of ordinations as well, and he was likely.
Yeah. So so a lot of people they'll argue about I'll listen to Tim Flanders will go on and on about what the documents of Vatican II said. Like even your guest, the religious hippie, she would say, well, gee, the documents didn't say this. Look, the liberals, they don't care what the documents say. They don't care what the documents of Vatican II says. They don't care about the facts. They use Vatican II as a means to an end. It was a vehicle to get them from point A to point B, right, to destroy the Mass, which they did. So you're not going to get another modernist to say, well, gee, now let me reverse it. John Paul II, he was on board with the revolution. That's why he called himself John Paul, right?
Oh, you're gonna alienate all the conservative Novus Orders because they love JP2. They love JP2.
I can understand if you look at it historically. If you look at the man historically and look at his actions, I mean, it's pretty apparent what he was about. Obviously, I respect Francis a lot more because Francis says to your face, I hate tradition. Where John Paul II was more of a showman. He acted like a conservative, and he would.
Here's the way I look at it. I wasn't there, so I try to have a certain amount of humility in is the church an apostasy? I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't honestly think that anyone in America can know with certitude that the church is in full apostasy. I mean, we've had bad times in the Catholic faith.
Did we ever have pagan worship in the Vatican? I mean, have we ever had popes, a line of popes? I mean, we had bad popes, like very bad popes in the past that, actually murdered people, had, sexual escapades.
Concubinage.
Yeah. Ran prostitution rings out of the Vatican, but they didn't touch the faith. Like now we have a line of popes that are actually touching dogma, touching the faith, and they're doing it. Like I said, they're using the mechanics of politics to do it. A lot of people say, well, gee, John Paul II, he didn't, or Francis, whatever, he didn't talk ex cathedra. Therefore, this particular thing, this opinion is not binding. It doesn't matter. The liberals, they don't believe in ex cathedra. That's what you got to get through your head. They don't believe in the doctrines of the church. They don't believe in the papacy. So if Francis or JP2, whoever the Pope is at the time, is on CNN saying his opinion to the people listening, that is the church. That is the doctrine of the church. Does that make sense?
I mean, no doubt Francis has said some things on record that could be easily deemed heresy. They have to be formal heretical statements, not material, because
right, I know. Like we get into all
these knows better what he's saying.
That's the problem, is we get into these technicalities. We're like, well, gee, he was just talking off the cuff. Well, I mean, I'm a Catholic, you're a Catholic. Would you say those things off the cuff to somebody? Like if your friend was talking about homosexuality, would you say, well, gee, I mean, who am I to judge? I mean, you'd say, no, it's a sin. Like, homosexual lifestyle will lead you to hell. I mean,
he loves to do I'm going to do an interview with atheist reporters, and then the atheist reporters will report on something. Or like when Biden said that the Pope said it's okay for him to receive the Eucharist, even though he supports abortion. Then we go to the Vatican to ask him there if it's true that Francis said this. No comment. How many dubias has Pope Francis responded to in the past? No comment. I mean, that's like the modus operandi of the pontificate is no comment.
And you got to understand that, the so-called like conservative Novus Ordo, they're a vehicle to get you to accept the changes, just like rhinos, right? In the political world, the conservative Novus Ordo will accept whatever change is down. They're gonna be false opposition, right? You're gonna get your Cardinal Burke out there. He's gonna talk about, oh, gee, we shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. But then 5 years down the road, he's gonna be enforcing that when that comes down, whatever it is, whether it's communion in the hand or whatever. If they have women priests, he's in the beginning be against it, but then he will go along with it. You know what I mean?
I think a large majority of traditional Catholics are waiting for the quintessential heretical act. And then once they see that, they're going SSPX. Some will go CMRI, some will go Orthodox. So if we ever allow female ordination, which your favorite Pope, JP2, said we're never going to have. Okay. But either way, let's say Pius XI said that. And if the church ever rolls out, we're having female priests, well, then obviously the church is in mass apostasy because they're
we already do have female clergy. I mean,
well, we don't have female. Where do we have female clergy right now in the Catholic?
I mean, they do the readings. They do everything.
They're not ordained. We don't have ordained. We don't have ordained.
So, but I mean, to the common person, that's why altar girls were so important at that time in history, because it brought women on. Well, you already had women on the altar, which was unthinkable, by the way. I mean, the mass has already been destroyed. I mean, what more do you need to happen? I mean, the Novus Ordo is out there. I mean, just in today's world, if Luther was alive today, he'd be made a cardinal. I mean, Henry VIII would be given an annulment.
Well, Francis did make that comment about Lutheranism. He said I can't remember. I need to look up the quote before I misquote it, but it's something like there were good things about Lutheranism.
Oh, yeah. They made a stamp to commemorate him, right? I mean, yeah, it's just like, what more has to happen? It's just unbelievable to me that people still.
Well, okay, but let's go back to SSPX.
I'm sorry, can I just make this point? I think what people get trapped in is they say, look, this particular document here says this, therefore it must be, right? Like, I'm just telling you, these are things I see. Like, if the weatherman says, look, it's supposed to be sunny tomorrow and it rains, I'm going to say, look, it's raining outside. I'm not going to say, well, the weatherman said it was supposed to be sunny, therefore it is. I think a lot of Catholics, whether Novus Ordo or even traditional or quasi-traditionalists, they get into this trap where they say, well, this says this, therefore, Jesus said that gates of hell shall not overcome the church, therefore it never could happen. Well, you got to deal with reality. We don't know exactly what those words mean. We don't know. We got to deal with, and I'm not qualified to say, but all I know is what I see. I see what's going on. In order to get over a problem, to defeat an enemy, you got to know who the enemy is. If you can't name your enemy, if you can't get down to what the problem is, you're not going to fix it, right? So, I mean, if the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and we blame the Mexicans, I mean, right? I mean,
Well, I think what you're saying is that all traditional Catholics would agree with you. We have to identify the enemy. Certainly, Rome does have liberal change agents.
They are the enemy. I mean, they are
Okay,
the hierarchy in Rome and our hierarchy, the bishops, they are the enemy. They are out to destroy us. They are a part of the government. They are part of global homo. I mean, what has to happen for you not to believe that anymore? I mean, they're pushing homosexuality, you know?
I think a large majority of the trad Catholics are waiting for the quintessential, obviously heretical statements.
Well,
Like
I think, most
Jesus was a
times,
12th
like,
century
you
hippie.
see, I'm just
You
going
know,
to say my rosary at home, and what am I going to do? I have no influence, which is true. Okay, obviously, I'm just going to say my rosary, which is a great thing to do. Don't get me wrong, but when the Turks were coming to invade Italy, we didn't just say our rosary, right? Men got on the ships and went to fight them. Otherwise, Italy would be Muslim right now, right? So, I mean, you got to do something. These things are important. The church being the way it is affecting our lives on every level. That's what people don't get. Like, we're in the spiritual affects, the metaphysical affects the physical world, right? So by the church being out of whack is why we're seeing boys want to become girls and girls want to be boys. And, because the church has surrendered to the culture. These things are important, extremely important. God, where we're being passed judgment on. Europe is being overrun by Muslims. They're being invited in because of our sin.
no
These things.
doubt, does the West deserve a chastisement? Of course, we've been aborting babies. I
Yeah.
don't disagree with that at all. Going back to transgenderism, though, I mean, I would say that you could say the church has, I wouldn't say it's openly supportive of transgenderism, but the transgender push is by secular governments, and really it's by the culture.
Okay, but it's not okay. So, like I said, we got to get back to the political mechanism. So, what is the church going to do? The hierarchy. Of course, you're gonna have your, Cardinal Burke types say, "Oh no, this is sinful," but then you're gonna have your James Martin types, right? That are supporting it
Right.
and are pushing it, and that's what the policy is going to be. In practice, they're going to support it, just like divorce. In practice, the church does support divorce and remarriage. They just called it an annulment, right? I mean, we all know we all know people that been married for 20 years, had kids, and got an annulment and remarried in the church. So in
Yeah,
practice, the
I would,
church does support divorce. Now, doctrinally, you could point, yeah, of course, but that's what we got to look at. How are things implemented in the church? It's not what somebody says, it's how are these things implemented. These people are liars. These people, they have no backbone. They're politicians. They all they want is an easy life, and they don't care about the faithful. They don't care. And
so
that's
would you
why
say
the
the
whole
entire curia is that? Would you say the entire curia at Rome is completely corrupted and modernist and trying to destroy the faith? Or do you think it's certain change agents like the
I'd
St.
say
Gallen
the large
Mafia and other
majority,
liberals?
I'd say there's probably maybe a very few that, you know, that believe in the faith anymore. I think most of them are careerists and could, like I said, they're agents. They're
Power
basically,
corrupts.
yeah, they're NGO of the United States, Global Homo. You know what I mean? They parrot our lines, like our American government, or the elites, however you want to say, tell them what to do, and they do it. They do it on the spiritual, and they are actually a part of the religion of the Antichrist. The one world religion. The Novus Ordo is part of the one world religion.
So well, let's go back to SSPX then. So you think that the SSPX in Archbishop Lefebvre's decision to disobey Rome was justified? And if that's the
No.
case, then it was not justified that he did that, or it was justified
Oh,
that
it
he
was
did that?
definitely justified. I mean, come on, history. Look
Okay,
back. Look at the
well, no
fraternity.
doubt.
Never given a bishop. The fraternity split. People don't know the history. When Archbishop Lefebvre consecrated those bishops, then priests left the Pius X and went with Rome. So, and JP2, they set up the Ecclesia Dei Commission, right? But they were never given a bishop to this day. So I
Well,
think.
how do you still get around the fact that in essence the SSPX is justifying rebellion? That rebellion is okay because Luther used the exact same justification in his rebellion.
But
I got to
Luther
follow
attacked
my
the priest.
conscience.
Luther attacked the faith, right? Luther didn't just rebel. Luther
Well, he
attacked.
created false theology as well. But my
Yeah,
point is, like, once you open the door of rebellion, there's a lot
I
of groups, a
agree.
lot of heresies throughout Catholic Christian
Oh
history that rebelled. Look at the schismatic Orthodox, for example.
yeah,
They felt justified. So that's I think, and that's some of the comments too. It's like nobody is not sympathetic toward the SSPX in terms of they are a
well, let's
custodian
say
of the ancient
hypothetical.
faith.
Archbishop Lefebvre doesn't consecrate. Tradition would not exist today. Like
I
he,
get that. I
the only reason
understand
why
that.
the fraternity exists, just to the Christ the King, the faith would probably. I wouldn't be Catholic right now if
I
Archbishop.
understand that, but you're averting my question. Is
No, I
it
agree with you.
is justifying rebellion though, is it not?
Well, there is a time to rebel, right? There is a
Well,
time.
that's Romans 13.
I mean, you
I mean,
have
a
to.
lot of people misread Romans 13 in thinking that you always have to be obedient to government, but really, as long as the government is supportive of natural law and reinforcing,
Exactly. Like
it's a good
Lefebvre didn't rebel just because he said, "Well, gee, I want bishops and I want, for my little group here." It was on basis of faith. It wasn't, he was defending the Catholic faith. He wasn't like Luther that was saying, "Well, gee, why are you praying to saints and you don't need the Eucharist and solo fide and all this stuff, sola scriptura." I mean, he didn't come up with a new doctrine. He was just saying we have to preserve our faith. It's not about the mass. And the mass is definitely part of it. It's about the faith. That's what people miss. I mean, they act like, oh, well, gee, instead of Budweiser, I like Coors. It's not about that. It's about, I mean, the Eastern liturgies is just, I mean, I think, the Latin rite, the Roman rite is more venerable. It's the oldest rite in all of Christendom, right? But the Eastern liturgies are just as, holy, just, they you could go there and they're beautiful, just like the Latin rite. It's not, but it's the faith that's behind it. That's why they wanted to kill the Latin rite, because of the faith. It has nothing to do with, oh, we want English for, we want people to understand the vernacular. We want, I mean, history has proven. I could see in 1970 thinking this, but now when you see the effects of everything and how it's all played out, that they were out to destroy the faith. They changed the mass to destroy the faith. It wasn't.
Okay, I get that. Okay, so but you're saying a lot of arguments that sedevacanists would say. So why are you not a sedevacanist?
I'm not against sedevacantism, really. I'm not. I think the Pope is the Pope because the world sees him as the Pope. Obviously he doesn't act as a Pope. I think we'd all
Okay,
agree
but
with that.
that goes against SSPX thinking, because at an SSPX mass they do sanction and say that Pope Francis is the Pope of Holy Mother.
I do. I say Pope Francis is the Pope, but I don't just dismiss the sedevacantist argument either. I don't know what the answer is. I wish, they could be right. I mean,
and I think that ultimately is underlying the problem, is that in the right community of the Catholic Church, if I give brushback to the SSPX argument, then it's automatically I hate the SSPX.
Right, yeah.
If I question sedevacanism, then the sedevacanists call me a modernist liberal.
Right.
But then in the Novus Ordo conservative groups, which I have a lot of friends, if I say anything positive about Ecclesia Dei or SSPX or sedevacanists, then I am a crazy whack job. And then the far left, of course, would say that anybody that is right of them are crazy whack jobs. So it's like all this fighting, and Christ was clear, the house divided can't stand. And this is the problem, is that you see this fractiousness in the traditional community. Who's right? Who's right? And if you bring up one question, then all of them hate. Instead of finding commonality, we need to rally around each other.
You're not gonna, trying to get trads together is like corralling cats, right? I mean, the reason why people,
that's a problem. That's not a good thing.
Yeah,
I know. Than the Orthodox.
It's the personality types. Like people become trads. If they were followers, they wouldn't be traditionalists, right? So you get a lot of people, a certain type of personality that becomes a traditionalist. I think that look, most people do what they do because they're told to do it, right? I mean, you know, that's why it's so important. Like I got to go back that the way that, you know, the church needs to fix itself, because unless the media is telling you to be virtuous, you're not being virtuous. I'm talking about people in general. You know, people becoming homosexual because the media is telling them to become homosexual. You know, people do what they're told to do. That's why you have to have control of the media. Like, we have to get control of the media.
Again, everybody on the right would agree with that. Everybody on the Catholic right would agree with that. So I think what I see as the problem with everybody in the Catholic right, especially, and I wouldn't say everybody that goes to a Latin mass, but certainly Latin mass to the Sedevacanists, it's this sin of singularity. It's the sin of pridefulness. I know.
Of course.
I know there are no validly ordained priests.
Right.
I saw this. There was somebody who posted a comment. I went to a confession with a liberal priest. Is my absolution valid? Of course. And I wrote and I said, it doesn't really matter if the priest is in sin. He's persona Christi. As long as he says the words of absolution properly, it's a valid confession. Then I had somebody wrote and said, no, because none of those priests are validly ordained. But then I respond, I go, but you and I can give valid confessions in an emergency. So the question if they're validly ordained is a moot point. But it goes to this sin of pride. How do you know that the clergy is not properly ordained since the Novus Ordo? Nobody really knows. This is one of the arguments, right? They'll say, you got to go to Latin Mass because they changed the words of consecration. I understand that. But I think it's this sin of, I know better. And if anyone who disagrees with my thinking, let him be anathema. And this is the problem and why the Catholic right will never unite, especially the more fringy parts.
The shepherd has been struck, right? And the sheep scattered. We have no leadership. Like, we need a strong pope. Only a pope has got us into this mess.
Okay, but even a strong pope, the Sedevacanists wouldn't recognize a strong pope. If we somehow got...
I know, I disagree. I went to the CMRI because I put my kids in those schools for a short time. And I talked to one of the priests and I asked him, I said, well, look, if who was a pope at the time? Was it Francis or Benedict? I think it was Benedict. But I said, look, if Benedict woke up tomorrow and renounced modernism and, you know, made a statement of faith and started to straighten out the church, would you accept him as pope? And he sat back and said, yeah, I guess I would, you know, so.
And this was a CMRI guy.
This was a CMRI guy, yeah.
So a guy who's believing we haven't had a valid pope since 1958 automatically thinks that we would have a valid pope.
I think it's all a question of faith, right? If we get, if we get a strong pope, that I should say a Catholic pope, an Orthodox pope that actually is Catholic, I think a lot of these divisions would, of course, look, we'd lose. I mean, the church would lose millions of people. He'd probably be persecuted and hunted down and killed, you know, by the secular forces. But that would definitely unite the church. It would definitely unite the church. So.
Well, it would unite the right side of the church. It would, like you said, a lot of the lefties would leave and go to Methodism, Anglicanism, and
well, they're already gone. Look, most of the Novus Ordo. I'm going to say, going back to I believe that there is grace in the Novus. So I don't think God. This is just my personal opinion. Like I said, I'm just a guy. You know, I think people, if they go to the Novus Ordo, and I'm not saying that, you know, you go to the Novus Ordo, you're condemned. I think it's kind of a religion on its own. But can you go to the Novus Ordo and can you believe as a Catholic? Yes. Is it very, very difficult? Yes. Are they priests? I have to hope that they are. You know, I really do hope that they are. Is there a lot of doubt? Yeah, there is. But I'm not qualified. You know, this is going to take some future counsel to untangle. You know, or
what would it take for the Sedevacanists to believe that if we did have a new pope that came around and was conservative and kind of redid the last 50 years, you know,
I think that's all
enough for the Sedevacanists?
I think that's all it would take. But, you know, the Sedevacantists aren't the problem in the church. I mean, the Sedevacantists are a statistical zero, you know. Traditionalists are statistical zero. 99% of people that go to the Novus Ordo don't even know that tradition exists, right? So,
and they believe that gay marriage, 50% believe gay marriage should be
so I mean, the problem
female clergy, contraception.
The problem isn't Pius X and SEDS. The problem is the modern hierarchy. The problem, you know what I mean? The problem is with the Novus Ordo. I mean, they're 99% of the church. I'm throwing that out there. I don't know how big the Eastern rites are, but you
Pretty
know,
small.
you know, so unless they get back to the faith, unless they renounce their heresies and get back to, the Catholic religion, it's, I don't see any,
Do you think the best thing would be just if we had a conservative pope, which probably won't happen, but
I mean, to
like
define
Benedict
conservative,
said,
what do you mean conservative? Like, you mean
well,
Catholic?
I'm just saying that would espouse the actual deposit of faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Look, if
let's say
have
we had
one,
one that went against a lot of the stuff that Francis has been saying. You would alienate the left, but
yeah,
you're saying it's okay, let them go
okay, let
because
them go.
we'll just have a smaller, more vibrant, true Catholic church that actually
They're
believes.
separate. They're separate already. They don't have the faith already. I mean, they believe. I have. My brother's a big Novus Ordo guy. I mean, to him, it doesn't matter. Just be a nice person. We have these.
But he's still nominally a Catholic. He would identify himself as a Catholic.
He would, but to him, it doesn't matter what you are. Just be a nice person. It doesn't matter if you believe in Jesus or not. Like, these things don't matter. All that matters is you be a good person, and you'll go to heaven. That's it. I mean, that's the Novus Ordo religion is basically like a Hinduistic New Age religion. It doesn't really believe in Jesus Christ crucified. It doesn't believe in the Eucharist. It doesn't believe, in the dogmas of the faith. It believes in the Masonic one world.
Well, I think there's a difference between some of the leadership in saying these ad hominem, the Catholic Church or the Novus Ordo Church doesn't, blah, blah, blah. Because if you read any of the catechism that they're teaching to the kids or to 18-year-olds or to our OCIA, they're going to be saying what are the four Marian dogmas. They are going to be teaching about transubstantiation and the hypostatic union. I mean, they are going to be teaching
some of it. Yeah, I mean,
how
many kids in a Novus Ordo go through CCD? I mean, how many of them are really educated? I mean, like I said, I grew up in a time where, it was a lot stronger than it is now, and I didn't know any of this stuff. I mean,
but there's a difference between being taught the trueness of the faith, and most of them are being taught the trueness of the faith. So I think it's
the polls. I mean, do the Novus Ordo believe in the divinity of Christ? Do they believe in
right? Okay, but that's separate than what they're being taught. They are being taught Catholic doctrine. Now, yeah, you might have some CCD teachers, Sunday school teachers, who are being like, this is what it says. And this is what you should
going back, I had friends that were fired from teaching CCD because they taught like mortal sin and stuff like that. They were actually
right, and that's amazing. But they're fired because of the leadership. So I think we need to separate. Like most Catholics,
the leadership is the church, right?
Are being taught the true faith. They are being taught the true faith.
The bishop, well, maybe on the books. I mean, I'll concede that point. I mean, maybe at some level they're being taught the faith but in practice, it's not implemented, right? That's what's important. I mean,
well, that's a leadership problem. So it goes back to the same issue.
Of course, it's all the leadership. It all comes from the top down. That's how we look. Why are you a Catholic? Why am I a Catholic? Because our ancestors, right, are a king or the leader of whatever nations we came from told us to be Catholic. It came from the top down. It didn't come from the bottom up. That's why I told you before, we need to get control of the media. People need to be told what to do. If people were being told right now that divorce, it was on CNN every hour, just like they push homosexuality. Movies were coming out of Hollywood showing that, you need to be virtuous and you need to, please God. People would be trying to do that. The reason why they're living the life they are is because they're being told not to.
But we're never going to take over secular media, Jim. That's never going to happen.
Why not?
So, that's
the Spaniards took over South America. The Spaniards, they reconquered Spain. That was like a lost cause, man. They had one little, there was a bishop. I forgot the big leader when the Spanish Reconquista started. There was a bishop that told the leader of a band of fighters that look, just go to the Muslims and basically surrender and see what we could get out of this. And he said, Father, didn't you read the story about the mustard seed? Like, we need to fight. I mean, if we don't fight, We already lost. Who cares? I'd rather fight and lose. At least I could look at God and say, look, man, look, Father, I did my best. Like I fought, but just hide in a corner and say we're never gonna win. Yeah, we are. We know in the end, Christ is going to be victorious.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
we gotta.
Zapata has that great line when before he was killed. He's like, "I'd rather die standing I'd
Right.
rather die
I mean,
standing than die on my knees."
are your Mexican heritage? Is that? I mean, look at the Cristeros. I mean, did they just roll over? I mean, no, they fought for their faith. I mean, Mexico has a great tradition of standing up to the government, the secular powers. I
So then,
mean,
what do you recommend then? We march on Disney, we march on ABC,
well,
we march on all the institutions.
I
Is that going
think
to be effective?
we got to start somewhere. I mean, we need leaders, right? We got to have a leader, and maybe start at a small scale where we start training,
Local.
for confrontation. And when it comes, which it is going to come, we got to be ready, instead of just sitting back and saying, oh, gee, okay, well, oh, well. I mean, if we don't, America is America because people fought for it,
Right.
I mean, Turkey, Anatolia used to be Christian. The
Sure.
Muslims took it over, I mean, they'll take over, you got to fight. That has not changed, this whole mentality that, oh, we just, oh, gee, I mean, Jesus was just kind of like this hippie dude that just sat around. I mean, he turned over the tables in the temple. He took straps and beat people. He's not against violence per se, I'm not advocating like revolution against the government or anything, but I'm saying that,
How would you advocate reforming the church?
wow, I mean, that's
Because say anything but
a
political about
hard
the United
job.
States is different. Because I mean, again, that's going to be armed insurrection and so forth. But let's talk about the
I
church.
would say step one, we have to reform the church. Without the church, none of this other stuff is
Okay,
possible.
so how do we reform Rome? How do we reform
I think we have to make our bishops uncomfortable. Like we should be in front of our bishop's face. Like the second he walks out that door, man, we should be in his face and say, look, be a man. We got to make him uncomfortable. That he wants to quit the job because he's like, if I implement this liberal stuff, these people are going to freaking drag me. I mean, we have to make his life miserable. That's the only way. Because these people are in it for an easy life. They're not in it because they care about the faith. There might be like Bishop Strickland, like a random guy that kind of has the faith, that he'll probably be like, amen,
So
brother.
petition our local bishops, tell them
Don't
not
do
to
it.
accept.
You send a petition to the local bishop, it's being used as toilet paper. I
So
mean,
you think we should physically harass our local bishops?
I think we should harass our local bishops. Yeah, if they're not standing up for the faith, then they should be harassed. Yeah. That's what they did. Look, I mean, you look at the Middle Ages, if a bishop said something heretical, people were in the streets.
Right.
I
Well,
mean, Emperor Otto overthrew a pope. I mean, he marched into Rome and overthrew a pope. I think it would, almost take something like that. I mean, we're in deep, deep water. I don't think people, we are in deep, deep doo-doo here. I mean, it's unprecedented. It really is. I mean, the
this
bishop,
goes,
Pope just stacked the College of Cardinals to make sure that he has a liberal successor because he's getting ready either to retire or die. I mean, he just did it right in front of our faces, and we're just,
yeah, but that's nothing new under the sun. I mean, popes have been doing that since we've had the College of Cardinals. Let's be real. It's not necessarily liberals, but they've been putting
Paul
in
the
people
Sixth
that are
was the first to
sympathetic
do
to
it, to say, well, you have to be 80 years old. There was a set number of cardinals for many centuries, right? From what I understand, I could be wrong, but yeah, I mean, I think at the local level, yeah, if we target certain bishops, and I mean, there's going to be hell to pay. I mean, you will be arrested. I mean, you might even be killed. But I think this is what it'll take because the powers that be will recognize what we're doing. They'll recognize the danger to that. Because right now they're sitting pretty, man. Like they are victorious. They have won. I mean, the church has been taken over. The church has been infiltrated. All our institutions have been infiltrated, not just the church. All the we don't have one institution that stands up for us. None. And we are said. I mean, look at me. I'm a perfect example. I live an hour and a half away. I mean, there's no support. My children, they're trying to raise their children. There's really no support. We're all on our own. I mean, we're easy pickings, unless, we got to have some leader, and maybe you're this leader, Albert. We got to have some leader to organize. Like I was watching this documentary on Russia about a year and a half ago about the Russian Orthodox Church, and I tell you, man, like they got it wired. I mean, of course, it's all ingrained in their culture. Like they have like these groups of guys that meet and, they practice martial arts and they're manly. Like we need something like that. Like we need something where, we got to start getting mean. We got to be the conquistadors, When Cortez landed in Mexico, he didn't shake hands with the Aztecs. I mean, he took it to them, right? I mean, when they saw the Aztecs, having
he had 200 Spaniards and he overtook an empire.
Yeah, he told the Aztecs. These were men. I mean, these guys. We don't hold a candle to these guys, right? I mean, look, Antifa are enemies. These guys have cuñones, man. I mean, they're out there in the street. I mean, I disagree with them. I don't like them, but I give them credit. I mean, they believe in what they believe.
So you think we need to go back to what Europe had in the 19th century, like Catholic action groups, and actually have Catholic fraternities that aren't the Knights of Columbus that just,
we need Franco.
Well, credit what the Knights of Columbus do, but I mean, you think we need more of the...
we need action. We need like serious action, like not nice action. Not, oh, gee, like, I tell you what, guys, let's write a letter to your bishop and let him know that I mean, come on. I mean, we got to be grown-ups,
Well, okay, but we have to be pragmatic. So the idea of harassing our local bishops to the point of getting arrested. Okay, the devil's argument would be, even if you got to oust that bishop, Rome would just bring in a new bishop that's sympathetic.
We demand that we want an obedient bishop. We want a Catholic bishop.
Okay, but Rome won't listen, and they'll just send another lackey, though.
Well, this can't happen. This has got to be happening in the United States. It's got to be happening in Italy. It's got to be happening in Spain. I mean, I get you. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that, we got to start somewhere.
So we need a coordinated harassment of bishop. And well,
unless God himself intervenes, which we got to look at history. God does not intervene. God uses men to intervene for him. Like I said, those brave men that marched off on the Crusades, God didn't just, send a heavenly spaceship to send them over there. They had to walk there. They had to fight their way there. I mean, God gave them the courage to do it.
Yeah, but we were in the milieu of Christendom. We were surrounded by Christian values. And I think that's the major problem, is that we live in a secularist world, and all the Catholics.
People are hungry. Look at Trump. I mean, look at Trump. People are hungry. This guy Trump, he's an empty shirt, man. And people voted for him because he gave them hope. So you see that there's a huge underswell in this country. But
I think using historical examples of Catholics that have rallied is poor, because we've never lived in as secular of a world as we do right now. And that's the problem. The majority of Catholics have been completely co-opted by secularist values. They don't even know it. And I would even say far right traditional Catholics, a lot of them have been co-opted, and they don't even know it.
Yeah. So we're all in the mud of liberalism. We're all liberals. Right. I was listening to that poor girl. I mean, she was spouting liberal doctrine, right? This all comes out of the French Revolution. We all have mud on us, but let's wipe that mud off.
So we are behind enemy lines. We don't have a coordinated action group really to rally.
Right.
So what do we do aside from teaching the faith to our family and going to our traditional parishes? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. Like, how do we make the church more traditional?
Fast and pray. I'm not saying don't fast and pray. That's very important. Look, when the first attack on Jerusalem failed in the first crusade, what did they do?
But that was a different time, Jim. We were in Christendom. We're not in Christendom. We are in secular hellhole.
They're in enemy territory. They fasted. They marched around Jerusalem barefoot, and they attacked the next morning and were victorious. I mean, yeah, we do have to fast and pray. We're going to have setbacks. It's going to be difficult. We are going to die. I mean, but in the end,
Even if they were not successful, and eventually they were, and eventually we were not because we were kicked out of the Holy Land by 1293, they could always send more Catholics because Europe was Christendom. We don't have Christendom anymore.
wow, like
We are pockets,
we're
exceedingly
big.
small pockets of traditional
How many
Catholics.
Mexicans live in Texas?
I'm sorry?
How many Mexicans live in Texas?
I mean, we
These
have
are
like
brothers. These are
25
like,
million Texans,
yeah,
but
how
a
many
lot of
Poles
those
are in this country?
Mexicans
How
aren't
many
even Catholics anymore.
They will be. It's in their blood. It's in our blood. I have
Yeah.
fallen away, but they will. When they see the call, they will come back because they know in their heart.
Okay, but what call is that? What call do you
Well, they
want?
want to
You
see,
want a
they want to
bugle and
see
have
manhood.
all?
They want to see some manhood, right? They want
No,
to see,
no doubt.
you know what I
And this
mean?
is something I've talked about in the MGTOW episodes. There is a lack of masculinity for
Yeah.
sure in the last 60 years.
That's what pushed a lot of these guys away. If they see some manhood, then they'll be like, all right, let me get a hold of it. I mean, I know I worked in the oil field in Texas. I've been around a lot of these people. I've been around, obviously my own people. We're looking for leadership. We need manhood. We've been beaten down by women and feminine, it's ugly right now, but we can
Yeah,
fight
but
back. We
what are
can't.
the pragmatic ways? What are pragmatic actions
Oh,
that
yeah.
Catholic men and women can do aside from teaching the faith to their
Yeah, so I said
children
we have to
and
start
going
a
to
group.
mass and
Let's
prayer?
start some kind of action group. Maybe some of the people on here, we could get some ideas together and get it started. We have to start an action group, and we have to start taking action, and we have to put ourselves out there. And that means, you know, living a hard life, which is scary. It's scary to me. I mean,
Well, I think
I don't want to lose, I have a little house right now. I'm 50. I'm looking to retire, right? I don't want to lose that. But if it means that my grandchildren will have hope, you know, I pray for the day that the Sacred Heart's on the flag and the crucifix is in the White House. You know what I mean? If it means that it'll make that possible, there's a chance that'll be possible, that I'm willing to lay it on the line. I'm saying that publicly. I'm willing to lay that on the line. And come on, these people that we'll be going up against, they don't believe in the faith. They have no faith. All they have is these bishops. A lot of them, they're empty suits. They're not strong people. They'll fold easily. They'll fold easily if we confront
it's a
them.
seven-headed hydra, though. If you're able to somehow oust a liberal bishop like Supich or somebody like that, or Cardinal Gregory, whatever, they'll just bring another lackey.
Well, we have
You're
to
just
plan for this.
chopping off one
Yeah.
tentacle, and just another one grows.
Yeah, we have to plan for this, and we have to plan what their reaction's going to be, and we have to be able to suffer. We have to have media behind us to record all this because the secular media is going to burn us alive.
What media?
Yeah,
what
exactly.
media is going to support
That's
us?
a huge problem. Is our enemies control the media?
They control everything. They control
Yeah.
academia. They control publishing. They control social media. They control everything.
It's a huge. I mean, this is a huge problem.
It's a major problem. So what can we do? We can teach people the faith, and we can evangelize, teach people apologetics, keep trying to have large families, try to keep our
doing that,
Catholic
right? You're
family
doing that. Taylor
Catholic.
Marshall's doing that. Tim Flanders, all these guys, Catholic guys. God bless them, man. They're all doing it, right? So, but we need more than internet.
Because we're just talking to the courts. We're talking to the courts. Marshall's people are the same people that watch The Remnant, that watch, whatever, Return to Tradition or whatever channel. It's the same people talking. And then what essentially is everybody's fighting. Everybody in the trad right is fighting.
Well, that's going to be a problem.
They're all fighting with each other.
Yeah, no, the trads aren't going to want to join hands with Norvis Ordo people.
But this is the problem. It's fractious and nobody agrees. And this is exactly what the devil wants. Everybody fighting.
You're right. I mean, I agree. Look, without a leader, we need a leader.
But see, this is what Stephen said, though. We need a strong pope. We need a leader. I just don't. I don't see that happening. But I don't have any answer to this. I don't know.
But if we could get just an action group out there, and maybe join hands with a conservative Norvis Ordo and say, look, okay, we disagree on this, that, but we agree that there's a problem and we need. But I mean, a lot of them are complicit. I mean, a lot of them, oh, gee, my bishop. I mean, he's a nice guy. I mean, a lot of them are. So in a way, we're going to be taking on the Norvis Ordo establishment, which, you know.
Well, look, the way I look at it is this: it's like we have to convert and evangelize and practice apologetics to all Catholics, all lapsed, fallen away Catholics that are in mega churches and all that. And ultimately, our job is to admonish the sinner and inform the ignorant. Those are works of mercy. We're supposed to be doing that pretty much every day. And then you wash our hands of them, right? What did Christ say? You shake the dust off the sandals. You preach, they don't want to hear it, move on. And that's how I feel about liberal Catholics. We pray for them. We want them to come back. We evangelize. They don't want to hear it.
I mean, you know, look, I don't, you know, a lot of them are the way they are because they don't know any better, right? They're in ignorance, and look, it's coming from their bishop. You know, it's hard for me to talk to like a Protestant about the faith when he points to my own Pope, right? I mean, he's saying, well, look, this is what your Pope says. I mean, come on. You know,
this is what your president says.
You try to get into all this, and they're like, come on. Which I would be the same way. If I'm talking to some Seventh-day Adventist, and I said, well, look what your leadership did, and he tries to explain it away, I'm like, come on, man, right?
Well, no doubt. I mean, Biden, Pelosi, and our Pope are not doing us great favors for the traditional Catholic movement.
Of course not. The reason why Biden went to Rome and he got his blessing and Pelosi was to demoralize us. You know, they're doing this to demoralize us. They want us to say, look, you're defeated. Forget it. Give up. They want us to give up. Don't, you know, go ahead, so pray your rosary, because they don't believe in the rosary. They don't believe in God. I mean, these people, a lot of them are, you know, they're basically atheists, Satanists. You know, they're mocking us to our faces, you know, wearing our clerical robes. That's why we should be outraged at these bishops, because they're fakes. They're phonies. Right. They're wearing our uniform. It's kind of like I served in the Marine. It's kind of like, you know, I'll tell you a funny story. I was looking to hire a guy. I own a small business. I try to hire vets. This guy comes in. He's in a public place. I'm interviewing him. He tries to tell me he was in the Marine Corps, and I start asking him questions, and he wasn't in the Marine Corps. And because I was asking him questions, but from the questions I asked him, I could tell he wasn't in the service, right? He got mad at me, got up and ran out. I mean, that's what these people are. It's stolen valor, you know?
Okay, but how can the day in, day out traditional Catholic in America fix the curia? How can you fix the curia?
Holy anger, holy meanness.
How can we fix the curia?
That's why I said we got to start with the bishops. It starts with your local bishop. I mean,
I don't agree. I don't think doing anything with the bishop will not make a difference, because it's a seven-headed hydra, and we'll just have another modernist bishop being planted over.
We got to go to. Look, we could all strategize. I mean, I'm putting something out there.
Ultimately, it's grow the traditional community. And just like Tertullian said, the blood of the martyrs will grow the church. So if we have more traditional Catholics, does help swell our numbers.
I mean, we're a statistical zero.
Right, no doubt. But like you said with Pelayo and the Reconquista in Spain, Spain was overtaken.
What's the guy that just asked the comment? You said, what was his name? The guy that you just read the comment from. Oh, I thought you read a comment that said, "Oh, you know, just blood of the martyrs and all that."
That's Tertullian, early Christian. Well, he's no longer. He's not a Catholic.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were somebody was commenting, and you.
No, Tertullian had that famous line, "It's the blood of the martyrs."
Oh yeah, no. But look, like I said, the city I grew up in had dozens of Catholic churches in it. Most of them are closed. There's mosques now. Okay.
Right.
Our traditional churches across this whole state, where tens of millions of Catholics live. I wouldn't say tens of millions, maybe, but definitely millions of Catholics live. Couldn't equal the city that I grew up in. I mean, we're statistical zero. You know, just because you go to your local Latin mass, a little chapel that, okay, maybe they have a lot of, it fills it up. I mean, it's still a drop in the bucket. I mean, and I understand that God could do what God could do.
But growing the traditional community would not be a bad thing. It would not be a bad thing.
We need to do that. Bad thing, definitely.
Hold on, there's somebody who's calling in, I think. Hold on.
Okay, thank you.
Hello? Give me 1 second. Hello? Go ahead.
Yes, my name's Michael.
Hey, where are you calling from?
There's like a 3-second delay, I think. I'm calling from Australia.
Nice. What, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I grew up in the SSPX. I don't know if you guys are from that organization. I just stumbled upon your video now on YouTube. I found it a bit fascinating. There's a school here in Victoria, in Australia, called St. Thomas Aquinas. Have you heard of it?
No. But go ahead.
Okay, it's an SSPX school. I was one of the first students there, and there was a teacher there called Father Todd Angeli. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's from America. I think he's in Michigan currently.
Okay.
He's on Michael Voris's video about the SSPX with allegations made against him.
Okay.
But I don't know if those allegations are true or not. But I just thought I'd share a story between me and him. If you know him, you're more than welcome to ask him. I've been trying to get in touch with him. I was one of his first students in that school, and he was teaching us about Matthew's Gospel. And this weird, and I was ready to die for the SSPX. I lived at 100% most of my life in the SSPX. But this spirit came to me and started talking to me, and you can ask Father Angeli about this. And she told me to ask a question, and I refused because I was embarrassed. But then if anyone is listening knows Father Todd Angeli, please ask him. So she asked me a couple of times, and all I know is the spirit of a woman. So during recess, she came back to me while Father Angeli was talking to one of the students and laughing, and she told me to ask a question again. So I thought, all right, now I'll ask. And the question was to do with what Father Angeli was teaching us from Matthew's Gospel from chapter 16 to 18. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, if the Pope has the power to bind on earth and it's bound in heaven, and he said, yeah, that's right. And I said, doesn't that mean he can bind on earth that the Mass should be said in English rather than Latin? And then instantly, both of us were in some sort of, I don't know how to describe it, something else happened. And this woman revealed to me that Father Angeli was living a double life. And he knew that the SSPX was wrong. And I don't know, it was very interesting. I'm trying to get back in touch with him because since then, that woman came back on 2 more occasions. And once when I was planning an attack on John Paul II, and she stopped that, and again told me to return to the church and leave the SSPX, and that was involving another priest called Father Michael Delsort of the SSPX. And then a girl died at Hampton Church in Victoria, and that woman returned and told me I had to leave again and return to the Catholic Church. And I did, and she left me alone, and that was 2011. And she left me alone until 2019, where I started working at a warehouse, the Woolworths warehouse in Mulgrave in Melbourne, and a man tried to run me over with a forklift, and she intervened. And that's my only contact with this woman. Any thoughts?
I don't have any thoughts. It's a fascinating story. I don't have any thoughts on that. I think it's beautiful.
I heard the name Father Angeli, but I never actually met him, you know.
I'm trying to get in touch with him too, because we never actually spoke about it. When it happened, all that was told to me is that he knew that this was all wrong, implying that he had some sort of double life or something. And he got angry and walked up to his office. And I told my friends and all that at the school. The school is St. Thomas Aquinas in Tynong.
I can't comment on that. I would say reach out to the SSPX. I mean, they have a very large website, and there's a contact us, and just message them. I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. When I finally left in 2000, that was in 1997. In 2011, I finally left. The night before a girl died, the girl's then. Please pray for her. What happened was I challenged Father Scott and Bishop Felle on the issue, and I won those debates. Now, there was some sort of split in the SSPX, and a father of his came to my house, I think it was in 2013 in January, to get me to join the Bishop Williamson side. And again, I had a debate with him, and I was able to answer everything he said, and he was acknowledging that I was correct, but he still wasn't becoming Catholic. He was staying with the SSPX.
I mean, I can't respond to any of this. I don't know any of this story. And I think, Jim it goes to an SSPX church, but we don't know these leaders personally, so we really can't comment on any of this. But
okay, that's fair enough. But let me get to my point. My point is that in the Bible, it clearly says that you have to follow the authority of the Pope. He's protected. Mm-hmm. And the Pope has signed that everybody should follow Vatican II on the 12th of January, 1966.
Who said that? Paul VI said that in 1966, that we must follow Vatican II?
Paul VI said that.
Okay. Well,
this general audience on the.
Okay, and so what's your argument? Is that what? Because the SSPX does recognize the Pope as the valid Pope. They just don't necessarily agree with some of the fruit of the post-conciliar time, mainly the Mass.
So what I'm getting at pretty much is that I don't think this movement is legitimate. I mean, I don't know how to explain what happened with that lady. I'll admit it sounds a bit weird. But the evidence is there. Like the SSPX never got in trouble for saying the Latin Mass. They got in trouble for trying to ordain priests in secret in the 70s and then consecrating a bishop. And this whole traditional movement seems to be based on that whole idea from Lefebvre,
of disobedience.
Yes.
Okay. I think we got your message. Thank you for calling in, brother. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. God bless you.
You too. Well, I think, Jim, he's bringing up, and we'll finish up pretty soon here. He's bringing up something that I brought up in earlier. I mean, there is a spirit of disobedience. You will say it's a legitimate disobedience.
Well, he says, well, gee, if they want to say the Mass, you could say the Mass in English. Like I said, it's not about the Mass. It's about the faith. The Mass is part of it, but it's about the faith. It's not. That's what, and somebody chatted something about, Jesus gave the Pope, the Pope is bound to tradition. The Pope isn't, and Pachamama was fake news. I mean, come on.
Well, look, I mean, the Sedevacana, so the argument is the church will always be protected by Jesus. Jesus did say that. So when you bring that up to the Sedevacana, they'll say, well, there's nothing in that says that the occupant of Rome is the true church. The true church can be somewhere else.
I mean, God promised the Jews that they would rule, from the Jordan to the Euphrates if they were loyal to him. And he promised that, the temple would always be, right? But because the Jews fell away, they never ruled to the Euphrates, never. Even during King David, they never reached the Euphrates. God works, God makes, look, I believe in the promise, but how, and this story isn't over yet. We're 60 years into this, right? We don't know what's going to happen in, next year or 10 years from now, but we have, like I said before, I deal with what is. I can't, like I was saying, like a lot of people get stuck in, oh, well, this document says this, and, the Bible says this. Well, look, the Bible might say that, but I'm looking outside the window and it's raining right now. You know what I mean? Don't tell me it's not raining. Don't tell me that the Pope's okay. Don't tell me everything's okay when I could see that it's not, because then you lose legitimacy. Like if you're trying to tell me just on blind faith, what I'm seeing isn't what I'm seeing over a 60-year period, I'm not going to listen to you. You lose legitimacy.
We've had anti-popes. We've had 20-something anti-popes. We've had periods of church history that heresy was exceedingly prevalent. If you look, let's say, the 4th century.
Never from the seat of Rome. Like we didn't have popes that actually pushed heresy, pushed immorality publicly. That's the difference between now and then. And we have a line of popes that this has been going on with. I understand the caller, Like if he wants to go, if he doesn't like Pius X, I'm not saying Pius X is the church and everything with the Pius X is great. Look, there's scandals in Pius X. The Pius X,
Breakaways from breakaways.
yeah. I mean, they're humans just like me and you. They're not superhuman. They're not like some special holy people that, the pure people or something like that. It's not. They're men that are trying to do their best in a bad situation with no leadership, and
So in closing, let's go back to SSPX. So you think that their disobedience, Archbishop Lefebvre's disobedience, was righteous and justified because of the fruits of the Novus Ordo Mass and what happened?
I think, come on, history has vindicated him. I mean,
but I just want on record, that's what you're saying, that disobedience was justified.
I think his disobedience to Rome at that time was definitely justified. Yeah.
And I think this is something that, if the SSPX YouTube channel, they have a series called The Crisis in Faith. There's like 50 episodes, and they do tackle the question I just asked.
Yeah, they get really detailed. There's a great documentary about Archbishop Lefebvre. There's books, read. I mean, don't just, Archbishop Lefebvre, something that really touched me, that when I read about him, was he had this statement that he would rather die than go against Rome. I mean, he would rather die than do what he had to do. It wasn't an easy decision. It wasn't like,
right,
I'm so holy and these other people aren't. He wasn't like that at all. I mean, I never met the Archbishop. I never, I came in after he was gone. But, people that I knew that met him, and, he was a very humble person. I think he'll be a saint. I think in the end, he's going to be the saint.
Well, I mean, for certain, he could be in heaven. I don't know what pope is going to start the.
Look at that! Come on, look at these.
Look
at these fake saints that they're making now. I mean, that really touches. And I think they do this to mock us, to touch on the indefectibility of the church, like to make these people that we know aren't saints, and rush them through like 2 years after they die. I mean. It's going to be a future council that's going to have to dig all this stuff up and, go through all this stuff again and explain this, It's going to be a tough explanation.
And why would they bring in a future council?
Because look at the mess. We're going to need a council to straighten all this and get some doctrinal purity back. Because really, right now, we're in a mess. There's really no unity of faith, right? I mean, you could go from one parish in San Antonio to another parish 10 miles away, and they'll have completely different beliefs on different subjects, on important subjects.
I think if we had a new pope come in and issue a convocation for a council, I think in this world that we're in, this council will probably not go the way that the traditional Catholics.
Well, not right now, no, definitely. But I'm talking about in the future when we get some sanity back. I mean, I believe in the end, the church is going to be victorious. Christ will be victorious.
Well, we know that for sure.
Yeah, we know that. And I think, there's many prophecies about the great monarch, and I don't know if you ever touched on that. I don't know what to believe about that. The great monarch and the great pope that's supposed to come.
I don't trust any private revelation because we're not beholden to believe anything.
Right, exactly. There's the Our Lady of Good Success in Quito, Ecuador. There, she prophesies like in the 1500s that the flame is almost going to go out. Right before it goes out, then it's going to be a resurgence. So, and all the governments of the world are going to be ruled by.
You have Our Lady of La Salette predicted apostasy in Rome. You've had
she said Rome will be the seat of the Antichrist, right? I mean,
there were saints that have had visions that were approved by pre-1958 church, like Lourdes and Fatima and so forth, but as a whole, I try to stay away from private revelations.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's such a slippery slope.
It is, and look, and all of people. Look, do the best you can. As an older guy, I get it. Not everyone could go to a traditional mass. Not everyone. It's the faith that's important. So, I mean, if you're in some Novus Ordo land and you're okay and your faith is good, hey, I mean, who am I? I'm not here to disparage you or disparage your family or anything. So I'm not saying that Pius X is, like I said, they're not the church, and they're a movement in the church, and there's good and bad things about it, just like the fraternity, Institute of Christ the King, all these other groups, the whole traditional movement. So I think it's a reactionary movement to what's been going on, and we'll see in the future where it brings us.
So, in the last question I'll ask you, where do you see the church in 40 years?
If things don't change,
Yeah, just in general, what do you see aside from like a supernatural intervention? Where do you see the
I'd say
church?
it'll be like the Church of England on the verge of extinction. Like basically, you might have a church here and there around the world, and that'll be it. It'll be, the Catholic faith will be like something in the history books, and that's about it.
I certainly think in the liberal teachings, if you read the tea leaves, I do worry about what the church is going to be espousing from Rome.
I mean, the Samaritans still exist. There's like 1,000 of them still alive. So, I mean, but yeah, unless things change pretty quickly within a couple generations. I mean, I see my children, like their friends. Like when I got back to Jersey, my younger children went to public school. They finished up, and I mean, they grew. These kids are from ethnic kids from Catholic families. They have no idea what the church is. They never go to church. I mean, we kind of live in this bubble, all us Catholics, and and we argue with each other, but we don't realize that the outside world. I mean, it is so bad. It's incomprehensible how bad it is.
Well, I think the trad cats know. I mean, I could speak from your anecdotal experience with your family and friends and mine, and it's just doing apologetics with random strangers and Catholics. Yeah, I think we know that the average Catholic is very woefully catechized and believes in a lot of heresy without even knowing.
Person is like the existence of God. Just get down to the basics. They don't have. It's really bad. I mean, I've talked to people where, I brought up references to, Noah's Ark, and they're like, what's that? I mean,
well, it is the dumbing down of America, and it's the infiltration of secularist values as the syllabus of errors predicted 180 years ago. Tons of people.
Sorry, I don't mean to talk over you. When you talk to people that went bankrupt, there's the saying, how did you go bankrupt? They say, well, it was slow at first and then really quick. I think, we had this residual Christianity throughout the West, like the Western world, that it lived on fumes for the last couple generations, but now it's going quick. Like now we're seeing a steep decline because
Europe is mission territory. I mean, Europe is not even. I mean, the EU openly said back in '92 that Christianity had no influence in the creation of Europe, which is just idiotic.
Well, it shows their hatred, right? It shows who's really behind it.
Right. So Europe is mission territory. I mean, I do have some subscribers here. There's one from Spain, but I mean, there's pockets of faithful over there. But I mean, it's like what happened with England and Ireland. Ireland had to go back and re-evangelize.
I mean, Ireland, right? Vatican II did to Ireland what the English never could: give up their faith. I mean, think about that for a second. The modern church got the Irish, right? The strongest of all Catholics, I think, right? Everybody admired the Irish for their faith, and look, they gave it up. I mean,
the church has been destroyed like in just 10 years. Same for Malta. Yeah. Malta was another very strong Catholic nation.
I mean, only Eastern Europe, maybe Poland, maybe.
Poland's fallen too. Poland's having a lot of problems right now maintaining the faith. You do see Orbaz in Hungary. Some of those countries are rebounding a little, but
it's it's Europe. I mean, we're actually in the United States because, like I said, my wife's from Peru, and even there, that in Peru, which was a very Catholic country, obviously Rose of Lima, Saint Martin de Porres, a lot of great saints. I mean, at least the people there. I mean, generally they think of religion as important. They have some kind of faith, but it's fallen off huge. It's throughout South America. I mean, Brazil used to be the biggest Catholic country in the world. Now it's not even majority Catholic. I mean, that's why I say I can't see how people could say, well, there's no apostasy. I mean, everywhere you look, there's garbage. I mean, there's no bright spots.
Yeah, for every one convert the faith gets, we lose about 12.
Oh yeah, I mean it's huge.
There's a hemorrhaging from the Catholic faith in general, but
KD,
you're more than welcome to tell me how I am not a trad in your view. I'm assuming that you are Sedevacanist or what is it that you think that And this is proof in point what I was saying, Jim, about how there's this fractious fighting where if you don't fully go with the apparatchik party line of fill in the blank rad trad group, then you're a modernist sellout.
Well, I mean,
this
people got to
is a
understand
problem in the whole movement, is that we have to find reasons to unite against a common foe, which is
we got to like people. Everybody's on a different part of the road. You know what I mean? Like if you listen to Taylor Marshall 10 years ago, he was totally Novus Ordo. I mean, he was a conservative Novus Ordo, right?
Everybody, I didn't listen to him. I don't really keep those content, but he was more Novus Ordo.
Yeah, he was. I mean, it was only within the last like couple of years that he really started seeing like, wow, the rot and everything. So you can't judge people. Look, I talk to Catholics all the time that fell away that are Protestants now, and it's like I can't judge them because first of all, I was there, and second of all, look at the church. I mean, if I wasn't a Catholic, if I was a Protestant now looking at the church, would I come back? Probably not, because it's such a joke.
I know a Protestant who recently converted. It only took her 3 months to go from being a Protestant, and she came in Easter Vigil, and she's gone to some Novus Ordo masses, and she's like, I recognize all these songs. We sing all these songs in Protestant churches.
I mean, they're an easy target. We could sit here and beat up on them all day.
Well, right? I mean, look, like trying to bring the Orthodox back. How is showing them the Novus Ordo Mass going to be effective when their liturgy is beautiful? And then we show them charismatic liturgical dances, bad pop music.
They have their modernists too. Don't let them fool you. I mean, I know where I grew up, there was, Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox. I mean, they have their problems too. They have modernists, especially the Greeks more than the Russians. But yeah, I mean, how do you talk to an Orthodox? It's
and come to my mass where we have pantomime dancers during the Our Right. By the way, Jim, we've been talking for 2 hours. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you for all the people that put up with me. And I ask you all to pray for me and my family, especially my daughter, my oldest daughter. She just had a miscarriage. She has 3 children. She just had a miscarriage, and she's trying to raise 3 little babies right now. It's very tough. And my middle daughter just got married last year, and I got my youngest daughter who I want her to get married, and my son who's getting engaged hopefully pretty soon. Please pray for all of them, for my family, and for the restoration of Holy Mother Church. God bless you all.
Amen. Thank you, Jim, for coming on. I appreciate it. God bless.
Bye-bye now.
So we do thank Jim for coming on. He was our longest live stream, over at 2 hours. So hopefully you did enjoy it, and we just talked about things. And again, it's just 2 lay Catholics just talking about the faith. And I don't have any solutions on how to fix things. I think any Catholic that is right of center would agree that it's a bleak time. And I don't know, we just have to pray. The power of the rosary is very strong, as Pope Pius V demonstrated, and Our Lady of Rosary during the Battle of Lepanto. So we keep praying and pray, and then figure out an effective strategy to spread the beauty of traditional Catholicism to not just the world, but to Catholicism in general. But guys, I appreciate you guys coming on. Take care. God bless, and pray.